The introduction of Rey in Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens is one of the most effective character introductions in recent years. To this day, it remains one of the most underappreciated aspects of the Star Wars story, and more people deserve to understand why it's so great. In this video, I'm going to talk about why Rey's introduction is perfect. Rey's introduction scene begins at the 10-minute and 41-second mark, and ends at the 16-minute and 43-second mark, leaving the entire scene at just over 6 minutes, which is actually quite a lot of screen time. Now, before we analyze the actual scene, we need to understand what should be accomplished in a character's introduction. The introduction of a character has two important jobs: to give an understanding of who the character is, and to lay the foundation of their arc. The first job is pretty simple. This is the first time meeting this character, so we need to learn simple characteristics about them. Where are they from? What is their life like? What are their personality traits, etc. Now, the second job is a bit more complicated. In a story like Star Wars, where the character goes on the hero's journey, they have to undergo a certain character arc. A character arc is the journey that a character embarks upon that sparks change within themselves. So the character begins the story with a certain flaw about them, and ends the story overcoming that flaw. Now, in the case of Rey, she is part of a trilogy, so her flaw is going to be something that she doesn't accomplish by the end of the first movie, but by the end of the third. So what is Rey's major flaw throughout the trilogy? This major flaw is her insecurity. Rey is easily one of the most insecure characters in all of Star Wars, and her arc in all three films centers around this. In The Force Awakens, Rey is insecure about her parents and her role in the galaxy. She believes that her parents wouldn't just abandon her, and that her only family must return one day. By the end of the film, she accepts her new family and proceeds to find the one who will save the galaxy because she doesn't think it's going to be herself. In The Last Jedi, Rey is insecure about her being the Jedi to save the galaxy. She looks to both Luke and Ben Solo as people who are worthy enough to lead the Jedi. She also believes that her parents must be someone of importance so she can feel worthy of being that Jedi. By the end of the film, she learns her parents were no one, and she fails to turn Ben back to the light, while remaining insecure about her role in the galaxy. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey is still insecure about her worthiness of continuing the Jedi legacy. She doesn't feel worthy of the Skywalker saber, and after she finds out she's the granddaughter of Palpatine, she believes she is destined for darkness. By the end of the film, she learns that she's not defined by her bloodline, but by her actions and her character, and feels worthy enough to take on the mantle of the Jedi, and in doing so, taking on the name Skywalker. Now that it has been clearly defined what her flaw is and how it is her major struggle throughout the trilogy, it's important to note that her first scene does not need to be the scene that exactly lays out her flaw. It's not until a few scenes later where Rey repeatedly states how she needs to go back to Jakku, and it's not until about halfway through the movie where she runs away from her destiny. But this opening scene should establish the character's ghost. Now, what do I mean by ghost? In The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, he highlights the 4 narrative questions that surround a character arc. What is the character's want, lie, need, and ghost? Let's look at Rey and see how these questions apply to her. A want is the goal the character wants to achieve. Rey's goal in The Force Awakens is to find belonging. However, the lie that she believes is holding her back. A lie is the falsehood that a character believes that prevents them from achieving their goal. This lie that Rey believes is that the belonging she seeks is with her parents who abandon her. This ties directly into her need. A need is the truth the character must learn so they can accomplish their want. The truth that Rey must learn is that the belonging she seeks is not with her parents, but with her new friends in the Resistance and as a Jedi. Now we can move into a character's ghost, which is the reason that they believe the lie. So now that we know what the lie is that Rey believes, the introduction scene needs to establish the ghost. So now that we know what an introduction scene needs to accomplish, let's look at the 6-minute introduction scene and see how it accomplishes these goals. The scene as a whole is divided into 4 narrative beats: Rey at the Star Destroyer, Rey at Nema Outpost, Rey at her home, and Rey saving BB-8. These 4 narrative beats each accomplish either establishing some basic characteristics or establishing her ghost. Beat 1. Rey at the Star Destroyer. The first beat of the introduction scene focuses the most on her life. We first see Rey doing some scavenging in the Star Destroyer while showing off her basic athletic skills. She exits the Star Destroyer and proceeds to drink some water. However, she barely has any water, which is shown by her repeatedly tapping the back of the bottle. What this conveys to the audience is that she lives a life of poverty. Water is essential to any living being, but she barely has any of it. She then proceeds to slide down the sand dune to her speeder. Now, this is more indicative of the Rise of Skywalker ending, but her sliding down the sand is replayed at the end of her journey. Just some nice simple poetry I wanted to point out. One aspect of the directing that I think is excellent is how J.J. Abrams chooses to incorporate wide angles. What this does is show the audience how alone Rey really is. In filmmaking, when a wide angle is used to display a single character, its emphasis is not only to highlight the scenery, but to also highlight the isolation around the character. Rey is a woman that currently has no friends and is all alone. These few shots give us a glimpse of that. Now, this take might be a bit of a stretch, but I like how the scenery is focused on the past. Rey is forced to make a living in the physical reminder of the past. A theme of the sequel trilogy is the new generation forced to deal with the consequences of the past, and I feel that it is subtly shown in this scene. So in this first beat, we learn a lot about what Rey's life is like and how miserable it really is. Beat 2, Rey at Nema Outpost. This beat is very similar to the previous one. It mostly shows off aspects of her life again. Rey drags her supplies with no one to help her. This further displays not only the loneliness she feels, but also the culture that she lives in, where no one around is gonna help her. Now, with this brief part of the scene where she cleans her tools, there is some insight I want to bring. This moment where she looks at this older woman represents the future she could potentially face if she never leaves Jakku. It is a short moment, but one that really represents a small desire for Rey to leave Jakku. But as we learn later on, she will not do so without her parent. She proceeds to sell her parts all for a quarter portion, and the way she walks away with her head down and all shows the disappointment she feels with her situation. So again, this beat really focuses on how miserable her life is. Beat 3, Rey at her home. Now, this beat, while being the shortest, is probably the most important one. We get a brief 2 images of a dead plant and a toy of a rebel pilot. The first one is symbolic of Jakku, a place of no life. The toy represents the story she's heard of the past, something that plays a role later on. Now, maybe the most important frame in this whole introduction scene is this one. The scratch marks on the wall instantly tell the audience that she has been counting the days since something had happened. Given the next scene a few minutes later when she talks about waiting for her family, the audience can put the pieces together that she's been counting the days since her parents left her. Rey's struggle to accept the departure of her parents is her biggest struggle in this movie. And just a single second or two of screen time displays this perfectly. She proceeds to make some food and sits outside to eat it. She puts on the rebel pilot helmet and watches the ship fly away. This always reminded me of the binary sunset scene in A New Hope. Luke looks away in the distance, wanting adventure, but is stuck on Tatooine. Rey looks away to the distance at a ship leaving the planet, but is stuck on Jakku. She then hears the yells of BB-8 and rushes to go save him. Now, before I move on to the last beat, there is something so brilliant about this scene that needs to be mentioned. We just learned so much about Rey's life and the way she feels in just about 4 minutes of screen time, but the part that is so amazing is that she has yet to say a single line of dialogue. We could have learned all this in like 10 seconds with a few lines of dialogue, but it's storytelling 101 to show the audience how a character feels, than them telling the audience how they feel. We are given numerous examples of how miserable Rey is, and not one of those examples is from her talking. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know I'm a sucker for scenes where there is no dialogue and where the visual does all the talking, and so far this is one of the best examples of that. Beat 4, Rey saves BB-8. Now, all this beat really shows us is a hint at Rey's personality. She lives in this miserable environment filled with miserable people, but at heart she is still a good person. She is willing to go out of her way to save someone that is in need, showing that Rey still has a good heart while also being slightly impatient. Now that I have covered the entire scene, you may have noticed that I didn't talk about her ghost yet. Well, I wanted to cover the entire scene first before I cover that, but now that I have, let's see how it connects. We see how miserable her life is and how she has dreams about leaving Jakku and fears about staying on Jakku, but that contradicts what she says numerous times about how she wants to go back to Jakku. What this demonstrates is how badly Rey needs her parents. She is willing to spend her whole life in this place that she hates just to be with her parents. And remember, Rey deep down already knows her parents are never coming back, but she wants them to so badly. She probably thinks to herself that there is no way her parents would leave her here on this planet without planning on coming back. There's also this hint of self-blame that Rey probably has about herself. Think about it. It's very common for kids to think that if their parents leave, it must be their fault. I've seen this many times in other shows, and I've even spoken to people that feel this way. Maybe there's a part of Rey that feels like she deserves to be stuck on Jakku. Now, while none of this is ever said in the movie, there are many context clues that she feels this. Throughout The Force Awakens, she only refers to herself as a scavenger because that's the only way she can define herself. It's not surprising that a kid that was abandoned on the worst possible planet feels like she can't be worthy enough of taking on the legacy of the infamous Jedi. So again, while it's never specifically stated, it's easy to see why Rey is so insecure and why she believes she isn't destined for any greatness. All because this introduction scene laid out the foundation of her miserable life. And that is why Rey's introduction is perfect. Thank you for watching another one of my videos. I don't really have many announcements. I'd like to say thank you everyone though for 200 subs. I reached it about 2 days ago, and I'm filming this on May 23rd, which is actually also my 3-month anniversary of starting YouTube again. So I just want to say thank you everyone who's been supporting my channel. I really appreciate it because 200 subs is kind of a lot for me, so thank you everyone. And besides that, I have my usual plugs. Don't forget to like this video, please subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me at thegoldman25 on Twitter because that is where I'm the most active. And besides that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to unite the Claude Squad, and I'll see you guys next time.